This is Breezy, a jam game I made about a year ago. And I won't beat around the bush. My next commercial game is going to be a remake of Breezy. Now, you may have looked at the thumbnail and thought that I was pixelating the game to try and hide it from you, but nope, that's pretty much what it looks like. And now I'll answer a couple questions you probably have, specifically why the game is in 3D now, and why it's all pixelated like that. Now, as for the 3D, the main thing is because the original 2D game had to be played on a flat plane. There was no way I could add any sort of depth, literally. With 3D, now I can use Unity's terrain system to add hills and different elevations. I can also add things like rocks and even more moving elements. Another reason I want to add 3D is for new camera angles. The game was getting a little bit stale just with the one top-down perspective, and although I'm keeping that as the main perspective, I want to add a sort of free camera mode where you can fly around all of the stages. This will also make the screenshots and trailer look a lot better, in my opinion. Now, the next question is, why am I making it look all chunky and pixelated like that? Well, the main reason is the same reason that many games use pixel art. It's to capitalize on nostalgia for a quick cash grab. In particular, I wanted to make it look like a mix between DS games, which the DS had a very low resolution, and the CGI sections of late SNES games and GBA games like Donkey Kong Country series. The only difference is, instead of the graphics taking hours to render in some computer in California and then being shrunken down to put on an SNES, the graphics are all rendered in real time right on your computer, and then just pixelized. And the next reason I'm making it pixelated is because this is my first 3D game, and I don't really know how to make 3D models or any sort of 3D art. And my art wasn't the best anyway, so making it more pixelated will hide those details and make them a little less obvious. And the last reason for the pixelation is actually a gameplay reason. Now, if you haven't played Breezy, it's basically a golf game, except instead of hitting the ball, you control the wind. Now, in most golf games, you have one specific point of view that will be behind the shoulder of your golfer, and you have to use that point of view to make decisions about the course. Of course, you can look at a map or even just a mini map, but those usually have limited resources about the details. You can't look up close on every part of the field. And I want to emulate that, but since Breezy is top-down, I'll emulate it by having it all be pixelated so you can't see everything at once. But enough of my long-winded defense of basic graphical choices. Let's talk about how I made this. I've only been working on this for about a week, and luckily one of the first things I did was set up GitHub, so I'll be using that as my script for this part. Pretty convenient. Now, the first thing I did beyond creating a Unity project was to try to get the pixelation method set up, because I knew from the start that I wanted to make a pixelated game, and I was pretty sure that I wanted to make it 3D as well, and obviously I decided to go with that decision. I didn't have a course at this point, just a couple cubes or maybe spheres. Anyway, my first method for pixelization was to have a render texture, which is basically a separate camera that outputs to a texture. And this texture was extremely low resolution, and then I blew it up with point filtering to make it pixelated, and I display that onto another camera. And I found out later that this is actually the same method used by A Short Hike, which is another game that has a similar method of pixelation in 3D. Unfortunately though, it was pretty hard to scale the render texture up correctly, and it would be especially hard to get it working for different resolutions of your screen. So I decided to go with a different method. I searched up the Unity Asset Store and found some shaders that made your game pixelated without having to deal with any sort of camera and resolution and screen size shenanigans. You just had to pick how many pixels you wanted and it would work. The next thing I did was mock up the course, which is probably the same thing you're seeing right now. I just used a bunch of Unity default brushes to kind of make some different hills of fairway and sand, and I think it looks kind of okay. I probably won't keep it as a real course because it's a bit cluttered and directionless, but I might keep it as a secret or something. I don't know, I just think it looks funny with all the stars made out of sand. The next thing I did was get the golf ball working, and get a list of hits for each level. Of course, there's only one level, so I just made a couple of example golf hits. You see, the way Breezy works is you have a set number of swings, which are represented as a vector 3, which represents the velocity of the ball that it will have when it's hit. So you just have a list of those for every level, along with some miscellaneous information like where the death plane should be, and you're good. But now it was time to implement some of the crazy camera shenanigans that I had talked about earlier when I was talking about why I was making it 3D. The first thing I did was add a zoom camera that let you move it around with the arrow keys, and then I implemented a free camera mode that let you fly around, and honestly, that's some of the most fun I've had with this game so far, just flying around that course mock-up level with the free camera. But even after all that, I still didn't actually have any wind in the game, which is, kind of the most important part. Luckily, that was pretty easy to set up. All I had to do was add a line saying to add the force to the ball, or corresponding to the direction of the wind. After that, I added the flag, which at the bottom of the flag, I added a hitbox that the ball has to touch in order to go on to the next level. I also added a neat wind box onto the top of the flag with some cloth physics, so it would kind of billow in the direction that the wind was going, and I think that's a pretty neat effect. I also used Unity's particle system, which is a very great particle system for particles, to add some wind particles. I made the particles by not actually rendering the particle itself, but creating a trail renderer at the end of them to kind of have that wind tail comet sort of effect. I don't know, I like to think of it as little pieces of air breaking off of the sky. And the last thing I did was give the game a little bit more juice by adding some particles and sound effects for when your ball hit the ground. I think the most satisfying one is when it hits the very top of the flagpole with a little gold sphere, and it makes kind of a ting sound. And that pretty much sums up my entire week of work on Breezy. I hope this game is finished in only a couple of months, and I'll probably have it out for about $2 to $5 depending on how good I think it is. But that's all I have to say on the subject. Don't forget to buy my first game, Wing It, and have a good day.